The federal safe house in Virginia looked like any other suburban home from the outside. But Sarah Martinez knew she was living in a different world now. 2 weeks had passed since FBI agents had brought her into protective custody from Clearwater Bay, and she still felt like she was walking through a dream. Agent Rebecca Torres sat across from Sarah at the kitchen table, reviewing testimony preparation for the upcoming trial. Dr. Richard Hartwell had pleaded not guilty to all charges, and his high-powered legal team was already working to discredit Sarah's evidence and her credibility as a witness. "They're going to attack your decision to disappear," Agent Torres explained. "The defense will argue that your actions show instability and that you fabricated evidence to justify abandoning your family. We need to be ready for that." Sarah nodded, though the thought of facing Dr. Hartwell in court still made her stomach turn. She had spent 9 months in hiding, watching from a distance as her family suffered, all to bring this moment about. She couldn't back down now. The reunion with her family 3 days earlier had been overwhelming. Sarah's mother had collapsed in tears when FBI agents brought her daughter home. Maria had alternated between hugging Sarah and expressing anger about the deception. David had simply held his sister for 10 minutes without saying a word. "We thought you were dead," Maria had said through her tears. "Do you understand what you put us through? Mom hasn't slept properly in 9 months. I quit my job to look for you." David had a breakdown and needed therapy. Sarah had no answer that could adequately address their pain. How do you explain to people you love that you chose to let them suffer rather than risk their physical safety? How do you justify the decision to become a ghost in your own life? "I'm sorry" was all she could manage, and even she knew how inadequate those words were. The media reaction to Sarah's reappearance had been intense. News outlets struggled to balance the story of her heroic investigation with the trauma she had caused her family. Some commentators praised her courage in exposing Dr. Hartwell's crimes. Others criticized her methods and questioned whether there had been alternatives to disappearing completely. "Missing Nurse Reveals Secret Investigation" read the headline in the local newspaper. "Hospital Hero or Family Abandoner?" asked a tabloid magazine. Online discussions were equally divided, with some people calling Sarah a hero and others labeling her as selfish and mentally unstable. The hospital where Sarah had worked issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging her role in exposing criminal activity while expressing regret that she had felt unable to report her concerns through proper channels. Several administrators had resigned in the wake of Dr. Hartwell's arrest, and the institution faced multiple lawsuits from victims' families. Dr. Hartwell himself remained defiant, maintaining his innocence and claiming that Sarah Martinez was an unstable employee who had fabricated evidence against him. His lawyers argued that her disappearance proved she was mentally ill and that her testimony should be considered unreliable. Ms. Martinez's behavior shows a pattern of deception and instability, his lead attorney told reporters. She is not a credible witness, and her alleged evidence was obtained through illegal means. But federal investigators had corroborated much of Sarah's documentation through their own investigation. They had found additional victims, uncovered financial irregularities in the hospital's drug purchasing records, and discovered communications between Dr. Hartwell and other staff members that supported Sarah's claims. Agent Torres explained to Sarah that her testimony would be crucial, but not solely determinative. "We have a strong case even without you," she assured her. "But your evidence and your witness testimony will help ensure he can never hurt another child." As the trial date approached, Sarah struggled with the decision about her future. The FBI had offered to help her relocate permanently under a new identity if she feared retaliation from Dr. Hartwell's associates. But the thought of disappearing again, especially after seeing what her first disappearance had done to her family, was unbearable. "I want my life back," she told Agent Torres. "I want to be Sarah Martinez again. I want to go home." "That may not be possible," the agent replied gently. "Even after Dr. Hartwell is convicted, there may be others who view you as a threat, and your family may need time to rebuild trust with you." The conversation with her family about the future had been painful. Maria was still angry about the deception and wasn't sure she could forgive Sarah for the months of agony. Their mother wanted Sarah to come home, but was afraid of losing her again. David supported whatever decision Sarah made, but worried about her safety. I understand why you did what you did, Maria told her sister during one of their supervised visits. But understanding doesn't make the pain go away. I held Mom while she cried every night for 9 months. I watched her age 10 years wondering if you were dead somewhere. How do we move past that? Sarah had no easy answer. The price of her heroism was becoming clearer every day. She had saved unknown numbers of children from abuse. But she had also inflicted lasting trauma on her own family. The weight of both realities was almost unbearable. 3 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, Sarah received unexpected news that would change everything again. Dr. Patricia Kim from Clearwater Bay called Agent Torres with information about Anna Davis that she thought might be relevant to the case. I've been treating a young woman here who was asking about Anna, Dr. Kim explained. She claimed to be Anna's sister from back home. But when I described Anna to her, she said it didn't sound like her sister at all. I think someone might have been looking for your witness. The revelation that someone had been actively searching for Sarah in Clearwater Bay sent shockwaves through the federal investigation. It suggested that Dr. Hartwell's network was larger and more organized than they had realized, and that Sarah's safety was still at risk. Agent Torres immediately moved Sarah to a more secure location and increased her protection detail. The trial was postponed while investigators looked into who had been searching for her and whether other witnesses might also be at risk. The investigation revealed that Dr. Hartwell had connections to a network of medical professionals who were involved in various illegal activities. Some were trafficking drugs. The small town of Clearwater Bay had always been a place where strangers stood out. With a population of just over 3,000 people, most residents knew each other by name or at least by sight. So when a young woman with brown hair and sad eyes started working at Murphy's Seafood Shack in early April, people noticed. She called herself Anna Davis and claimed to be from a small town in the Midwest that had fallen on hard times. She was quiet, but hardworking, always the first to arrive for her shifts and the last to leave. The restaurant's owner, Patrick Murphy, had hired her on the spot when she walked in looking for work, something about her desperation touching his heart. She seemed like someone running from something, Patrick later told investigators. But around here, we don't ask too many questions about people's past. Everyone deserves a fresh start. Anna rented a small efficiency apartment above the town's only hardware store. She paid cash for everything: rent, groceries, even the used bicycle she bought to get around town. She kept to herself mostly, though she was always polite to customers and coworkers. The town's residents gradually warmed to the quiet newcomer. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the local library, noticed that Anna checked out medical textbooks and nursing journals whenever they were available. The local doctor, Dr. Patricia Kim, mentioned that Anna had helped when she witnessed a car accident, applying first aid with obvious professional skill. She knew exactly what she was doing, Dr. Kim told her nurse. That wasn't amateur first aid training. That woman has serious medical experience. But Anna deflected questions about her background. She claimed to have some community college training, but said she was trying to start fresh after a bad relationship. People in Clearwater Bay respected privacy, and most accepted her story without digging deeper. What none of them knew was that every night, Anna sat in her small apartment reading news articles about her own disappearance. She had created fake email accounts and social media profiles to follow the investigation into Sarah Martinez's case. Each article about her family's grief felt like a knife in her heart, but she couldn't stop reading. She saw the photos of her mother lighting candles at church, her sister's tearful interviews with reporters, her brother's desperate pleas for information. The guilt was overwhelming, but every time she considered calling them to let them know she was safe, she remembered why she had left and knew she couldn't risk it. Sarah, now Anna, had been forced to disappear because of something she witnessed at the hospital. It wasn't the Tommy Russo case that drove her away, though that had been part of her growing unease. The real reason was much more serious and dangerous. 6 weeks before her disappearance, Sarah had been working the night shift when she witnessed something that would change her life forever. Dr. Richard Hartwell, one of the senior physicians in the pediatric department, was in the medication room with a young patient. The door was slightly ajar, and Sarah saw the doctor injecting something into the child's foreline that wasn't on the patient's chart. At first, Sarah thought it might be a legitimate emergency medication that simply hadn't been documented yet. But when she checked the child's file later, there was no record of any additional medication being ordered. The child, a 10-year-old girl named Emma Chun who was being treated for a minor infection, had fallen into a deep sleep that lasted much longer than normal. Sarah's nursing training told her something was wrong, but Dr. Hartwell was a respected physician with 15 years of experience. She decided to keep a closer eye on his interactions with patients, telling herself she was probably mistaken about what she had seen. Over the next few weeks, Sarah began noticing a pattern. Dr. Hartwell often volunteered to work with patients whose families were absent or distracted. He seemed to prefer children whose parents worked long hours or had limited English skills, and several of these children experienced unexplained periods of deep sedation. Sarah started documenting everything she observed. She took photos of medication logs, copied patient charts, and kept detailed notes about Dr. Hartwell's behavior. What she discovered made her sick to her stomach. Dr. Hartwell was systematically sedating young patients for his own sexual gratification. The children would have no memory of what happened to them, and their families trusted the medical staff completely. It was the perfect cover for a predator. Sarah knew she had to report what she had discovered, but she also knew how dangerous it would be. Dr. Hartwell was well-connected in the medical community and had powerful friends. The hospital administration would likely protect him, especially if the evidence was circumstantial. And if her accusations were public but unproven, her nursing career would be over. She decided to gather more concrete evidence before going to the authorities. Using her access to patient records and medication logs, Sarah built a detailed case against Dr. Hartwell. She identified at least 12 children who had been victims over the past 2 years. But Dr. Hartwell noticed Sarah's increased attention to his cases. He began asking questions about why she was reviewing certain patient files. He made comments about nurses who stuck their noses where they didn't belong, and how such behavior could be career-ending. The morning of her disappearance, Sarah arrived at the gym early to think about her next move. She had enough evidence to go to the police, but she was terrified about what would happen when she came forward. Dr. Hartwell had made it clear that he was aware of her interest in his cases, and she feared he might try to silence her permanently. During her workout, Sarah received a text message from an unknown number. "You've been asking a lot of questions about things that don't concern you. Some questions are dangerous. Back off or face the consequences." The message was followed by a photo of Sarah's apartment building and another of her mother leaving church. The implication was clear. Dr. Hartwell or his associates knew where she lived and were watching her family. Sarah left the gym immediately and called in sick to work. She spent the morning in her apartment, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. She couldn't go to the police without putting her family at risk, but she couldn't stand by and let Dr. Hartwell continue abusing children. The solution came to her as she sat staring at her laptop screen, reading an article about witness protection programs. If she disappeared completely, taking her evidence with her, she could find a way to expose Dr. Hartwell safely from a distance. Her family would be hurt by her disappearance, but they would be safe. Sarah spent the day carefully executing her plan. She withdrew cash from several ATMs, using different locations to avoid creating a clear trail. She packed a small bag with essential items and destroyed anything that might help someone track her. Before leaving, she made copies of all her evidence against Dr. Hartwell and mailed them to 3 different people: an investigative journalist at a major newspaper, an FBI agent who specialized in crimes against children, and a lawyer who handled medical malpractice cases. She included detailed instructions about where to find additional evidence and how to verify her claims. Then, Sarah Martinez walked out of her apartment and began the process of becoming Anna Davis. She used fake identification she had purchased from a contact she remembered from her brief time in the National Guard, someone who had connections in the underground world of people who needed to disappear. The first few weeks in Clearwater Bay were the hardest. Sarah missed her family desperately and struggled with the guilt of putting them through such agony. But she told herself it was temporary. Once Dr. Hartwell was exposed and arrested, she could return home and explain everything. But as months passed, Sarah realized the situation was more complicated than she had anticipated. Dr. Hartwell was more powerful and better protected than she had imagined. The evidence she had sent hadn't resulted in immediate action against him. The hospital had closed ranks, and the authorities seemed reluctant to pursue charges against such a prominent physician without more conclusive proof. Meanwhile, the investigation into her own disappearance was generating unwanted attention. Every news story about the missing nurse increased the risk that someone might recognize her in Clearwater Bay. She had to change her appearance, cutting and dyeing her hair, and she avoided being photographed whenever possible. Sarah also discovered that Dr. Hartwell had accused her of stealing drugs from the hospital. He claimed she had been acting strangely in the weeks before her disappearance and suggested that she might have been selling medications to support a drug habit. Without Sarah there to defend herself, the accusations went unchallenged, and her reputation was quietly destroyed. The stress of her new life began taking a toll on Sarah's physical and mental health. She lost weight and had trouble sleeping. She jumped at unexpected sounds and was constantly looking over her shoulder. The cheerful, confident nurse her family knew would have been unrecognizable in the anxious, withdrawn woman she had become. Dr. Kim in Clearwater Bay noticed that Anna seemed to suffer from what appeared to be post-traumatic stress symptoms. She offered to help, but Anna always politely declined, claiming she was just adjusting to her new life. "That woman has been through something terrible," Dr. Kim told her husband. "I've seen enough trauma patients to recognize the signs. Whatever she's running from, it's serious." As summer turned to fall, Sarah began to lose hope that Dr. Hartwell would ever face justice. The evidence she had sent seemed to have disappeared into bureaucratic channels without results. She considered returning home and facing whatever consequences awaited her, but she knew that would put her family at risk and might allow Dr. Hartwell to continue hurting children. Then, in late September, something unexpected happened. A new patient arrived at the hospital where Dr. Hartwell worked, the young daughter of a federal judge. When the judge's child experienced unexplained sedation during what should have been routine treatment, the judge demanded a thorough investigation. This time, the hospital couldn't sweep the incident under the rug. Federal agents arrived to investigate, and they quickly discovered the evidence that Sarah had sent months earlier. Her detailed documentation, combined with the new incident, finally provided enough proof to act against Dr. Hartwell. The arrest made national news. Dr. Richard Hartwell was charged with multiple counts of child abuse, drug trafficking, and conspiracy. The investigation revealed a network of enablers at the hospital who had either participated in his crimes or looked the other way. Sarah watched the news coverage from her apartment in Clearwater Bay with a mixture of relief and terror. Dr. Hartwell was finally being held accountable, but she knew that his arrest would also trigger a more intensive investigation into her disappearance. The connections between her research into his activities and her sudden vanishing would become obvious once investigators examined the timeline. She was right. Within days of Dr. Hartwell's arrest, Detective Hayes received a call from the FBI agents working the case. They had found Sarah's evidence packages and wanted to know more about the missing nurse who had compiled such detailed documentation of the doctor's crimes. "She's not a victim," Agent Rebecca Torres told Detective Hayes. "She's a hero who risked everything to expose a predator. But she's also a key witness, and we need to find her to make sure our case is airtight." The revelation that Sarah had disappeared while investigating child abuse changed everything about how her family and the public viewed her case. She was no longer seen as a troubled woman who had abandoned her responsibilities. Instead, she became a symbol of courage and sacrifice. But for Sarah herself, the attention was terrifying. She knew that if Dr. Hartwell's associates were still free, coming forward could put her in even greater danger. She had seen enough crime shows to know that witnesses in cases like this sometimes had accidents or simply disappeared permanently. As the news coverage intensified, Sarah realized she couldn't stay in Clearwater Bay much longer. Too many people were starting to ask questions about the quiet waitress who seemed to know so much about medical procedures. She began planning her next move, preparing to disappear once again. But before she could leave, something happened that would change everything. A customer at Murphy's Seafood Shack noticed the small scar on Sarah's wrist from a childhood accident that had been mentioned in news reports about her disappearance. The customer, A retired police officer named Jim Walsh, who had been following Sarah's case closely, realized he might be looking at the missing nurse. Instead of immediately calling the authorities, Jim Walsh approached Sarah privately after her shift. He told her he knew who she was and why she had disappeared. But instead of turning her in, he offered to help. "You're a hero," he told her. "But you don't have to face this alone anymore. There are people who can protect you while you testify against that monster." Sarah broke down in tears for the first time since her disappearance. The weight of months of isolation and fear finally overwhelmed her. She told Jim Walsh everything about Dr. Hartwell, the threats, her desperate decision to disappear, and the guilt she carried about her family's suffering. Jim Walsh contacted a friend in the FBI who specialized in witness protection. Within 24 hours, federal agents arrived in Clearwater Bay to bring Sarah into protective custody. Her months in hiding were finally over, but her ordeal was far from finished. The reunion with her family would be emotional beyond words, but it would also be complicated by anger, relief, and the difficult process of rebuilding trust. Sarah would have to testify in Dr. Hartwell's trial, facing cross-examination from aggressive defense lawyers who would try to discredit her motives and her evidence. But most challenging of all, Sarah would have to find a way to live with the knowledge that her heroic actions had come at an enormous cost to the people she loved most. The price of protecting innocent children had been her own identity and nearly 9 months of her life. Whether she could ever truly come home again remained to be seen. Sarah Martinez had always been the kind of person who kept her promises. That's why when she didn't show up for her sister's birthday dinner on that cold Tuesday evening in March, everyone knew something was terribly wrong. The restaurant buzzed with the usual evening crowd, but the corner table reserved for 8 remained half empty. Sarah's family sat there checking their phones every few minutes, calling her number again and again. Each call went straight to voicemail. Her cheerful voice message seemed to mock them now. "Hi, you've reached Sarah? Leave me a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." Maria Martinez, Sarah's older sister, tried to stay calm as she explained to the waiter that they were still waiting for one more person. But, deep down, she felt a growing knot of worry in her stomach. Sarah worked as a nurse at the city hospital and was incredibly reliable. She had never missed a family gathering without calling first. "Maybe she got called in for an emergency shift," suggested David, Sarah's younger brother, though his voice lacked conviction. He knew as well as anyone that Sarah would have called. She always called. Their mother, Elena Martinez, sat quietly clutching her purse. At 72, she had weathered many storms in her life, but the look of fear in her dark eyes showed that this felt different. "Something's wrong," she whispered in Spanish. A mother knows these things. By 9 o'clock, they had given up on dinner. The family drove straight to Sarah's apartment building, a modest 3-story complex where she had lived alone for the past 2 years. The superintendent, Mr. Chun, knew Sarah well. She often helped his elderly wife with her medications and had become like a daughter to the couple. "I haven't seen her since yesterday morning," Mr. Chin told them as he unlocked Sarah's apartment door. "She waved to me when she left for work, same as always." The apartment looked normal at first glance. Sarah's nursing textbooks were stacked neatly on the coffee table. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, washed and waiting. The bed was made with military precision, a habit she had picked up during her brief stint in the National Guard years earlier. But Maria noticed things others might miss. Sarah's favorite jacket wasn't hanging on its usual hook by the door. Her gym bag was gone from the bedroom corner where she always kept it. Most telling of all, Sarah's passport was missing from the small safe where she stored important documents. "We need to call the police," Maria announced, though part of her hoped they would find some simple explanation. Maybe Sarah had taken a spontaneous trip. Maybe she had met someone and fallen in love. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for all of this. Detective Robert Hayes arrived at the apartment an hour later. A veteran cop with 20 years on the force, he had seen enough missing person cases to know that the first 48 hours were crucial. He listened carefully as the family described Sarah's routine, her relationships, her work schedule. "Any problems at work recently?" Detective Hayes asked, pulling out his notebook. "Any conflicts with coworkers or patients?" "Never," Maria replied firmly. Sarah loved her job. She worked in the pediatric ward, and all the kids adored her. The doctors respected her opinion and often asked for her input on difficult cases. Detective Hayes made notes about Sarah's daily habits. She typically worked 3 12-hour shifts per week at the hospital. On her days off, she attended nursing school classes, working toward her bachelor's degree. She went to the gym every morning at 6, rain or shine. She called her mother every Sunday evening. What about boyfriends? The detective continued. Any romantic relationships? The family exchanged glances. Sarah had been single for about 6 months, ever since breaking up with her longtime boyfriend, Marcus. The relationship had ended amicably, according to Sarah. Marcus had gotten a job offer in another state, and they had mutually agreed that long distance wouldn't work for them. She dated occasionally, David offered. But nothing serious lately. She was focused on finishing school and her career. Detective Hayes spoke with Sarah's supervisor at the hospital the next morning. Linda Rodriguez had worked with Sarah for 3 years and considered her one of the best nurses on the staff. Sarah was supposed to work yesterday, but she called in sick, Linda explained. That was unusual for her. In 3 years, I could count on one hand the number of sick days she's taken. The detective's interest sharpened. What time did she call? Early, around 6 in the morning. She said she had food poisoning and wouldn't be able to come in. Her voice sounded strange, though, kind of strained. Detective Hayes pulled Sarah's phone records and bank statements. The last call from her cell phone had been made at 5:47 a.m. the previous day to the hospital. After that, nothing. Her credit cards hadn't been used. Her bank account showed no unusual activity. The investigation expanded quickly. Sarah's photo appeared on local news stations and in newspapers. The description was always the same. 28 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, brown hair, brown eyes, approximately 130 pounds. Last seen wearing scrubs and a blue jacket. Tips began pouring in almost immediately. Someone thought they saw her at the airport. Another caller was certain she was at a gas station 50 miles outside the city. A homeless man claimed she had given him money downtown. But when police showed him Sarah's photo, he admitted he wasn't sure. Sarah's co-workers organized search parties. They combed through parks, checked homeless shelters, and distributed flyers at shopping centers. Her nursing school classmates started a social media campaign with the hashtag #FindSarah. The story was picked up by regional news outlets, then national ones. Detective Hayes interviewed everyone in Sarah's life multiple times. Her ex-boyfriend Marcus flew back from his new job in Denver to speak with police. He seemed genuinely shocked and worried about Sarah's disappearance. His alibi was solid. He had been working at his new job, with dozens of witnesses to confirm his whereabouts. Sarah and I ended things on good terms, Marcus told Detective Hayes. We still texted occasionally, just as friends. The last time I heard from her was about 3 weeks ago. She sent me a photo of a sunset from her apartment balcony with a message saying she was happy. The detective studied Sarah's text messages and social media accounts. Nothing seemed unusual. Her last Facebook post was a photo of some flowers she had received from a grateful patient's family, posted 2 days before her disappearance. The caption read, "This is why I love my job. Sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most." As days turned into weeks, the initial media attention began to fade. Other stories took precedence on the news. But Sarah's family refused to give up hope. They hired a private investigator, a former police detective named Carol Thompson, who specialized in missing person cases. Carol brought fresh eyes to the investigation. She noticed something that others had missed. Sarah's gym membership card had been scanned at 5:30 a.m. on the day she disappeared, just 17 minutes before she called in sick to work. That's interesting, Carol told the family during one of their weekly meetings. If she was sick enough to miss work, why did she go to the gym first? The gym's security cameras from that morning had been recorded over, a standard practice after 30 days. But Carol tracked down other gym members who might have seen Sarah that morning. Most couldn't remember anything specific, but one woman, Janet Williams, recalled seeing Sarah in the locker room. She seemed upset about something, Janet told Carol. She was on her phone, and I heard her say something like, "I can't do this anymore," or "I won't do this anymore." I thought maybe she was breaking up with someone. This was the first real clue that suggested Sarah might have been dealing with some kind of problem before her disappearance. Carol dug deeper into Sarah's life, looking for any signs of stress or conflict that the family might not have known about. She discovered that Sarah had been taking extra shifts at the hospital recently, working more than her usual schedule. Her supervisors confirmed that she had volunteered for overtime whenever it was available. Her bank records showed she had been saving money aggressively, putting away nearly 70% of each paycheck. Was Sarah saving up for something specific? Carol asked Maria during one of their conversations. She mentioned wanting to travel someday, Maria replied. She talked about maybe doing volunteer nursing work overseas after she finished her degree. But she never said anything about needing a lot of money quickly. The private investigator also noticed that Sarah had been researching something online in the weeks before her disappearance. Her browser history showed searches for witness protection programs, how to disappear safely, and starting over in a new place. These searches had been deleted from her computer, but Carol was able to recover them. This discovery sent shockwaves through Sarah's family. Why would she be looking up information about disappearing? Was she planning to leave voluntarily? Had she been in some kind of danger? Detective Hayes reopened active investigation into Sarah's case when Carol shared these findings. The searches suggested that Sarah might have staged her own disappearance, but they also raised the possibility that she had been threatened by someone. People don't research witness protection unless they're afraid of something, Detective Hayes told Sarah's family. The question is, what was she afraid of? The investigation took on new urgency. Police began looking more closely at Sarah's recent patients and their families. Had she witnessed something at the hospital that put her in danger? Had she discovered some kind of medical malpractice or illegal activity? Dr. Michelle Carter, the head of pediatrics at the hospital, reviewed all of Sarah's recent cases with police. Most were routine: children with broken bones, respiratory infections, and other common ailments. But one case stood out. 3 weeks before Sarah's disappearance, a 7-year-old boy named Tommy Russo had been brought to the emergency room by his father. The boy had a broken arm and several bruises. While suspicious, the injuries could have been explained by a playground accident, which was the father's story. But Sarah had noted in the boy's chart that she was concerned about possible abuse. She had followed protocol and reported her suspicions to Child Protective Services. A social worker had interviewed the family, but no charges were filed. The father, Anthony Russo, had been angry about the investigation and had made complaints about Sarah to hospital administration. He called here several times, Dr. Carter told Detective Hayes. He accused Sarah of trying to destroy his family. He said she had no right to make assumptions about his parenting. Police tracked down Anthony Russo and brought him in for questioning. He was a construction worker with a history of minor legal troubles, mostly traffic violations, and one arrest for public intoxication. He had joint custody of Tommy with his ex-wife and was sensitive about any suggestion that he was a bad father. That nurse was way out of line, Russo told Detective Hayes during the interview. My kid fell off the monkey bars at school. Kids get hurt all the time. She acted like I was some kind of monster. Detective Hayes pressed him about his whereabouts on the day Sarah disappeared, but Russo's alibi checked out. He had been at work, and his co-workers confirmed seeing him throughout the day. As the investigation continued, more details about Sarah's state of mind emerged. Her nursing school professors noticed that she had seemed distracted in recent classes. She had turned in assignments late, which was unusual for her. One professor, Dr. James Wilson, recalled a conversation they had after class. Sarah asked me about the ethics of reporting suspected abuse when you're not completely certain, Dr. Wilson told police. She seemed troubled by the gray areas in nursing practice. I told her that it's always better to err on the side of protecting a child, but she seemed worried about the consequences of being wrong. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but they still didn't explain where Sarah had gone or whether she was safe. Her family clung to hope that she was alive somewhere, but as weeks turned into months, that hope became harder to maintain. The media attention that had initially helped spread awareness of Sarah's disappearance now began to work against the investigation. Tabloid newspapers started running sensational stories about the missing nurse and her secret life. Social media was filled with amateur investigators sharing theories, most of them completely unfounded. Some online commenters suggested that Sarah had been having an affair and had run away with a married man. Others theorized that she had been involved in drug trafficking and had fled to avoid arrest. The wildest theories involved everything from alien abduction to being recruited by a secret government agency. These stories caused additional pain for Sarah's family, who struggled to understand how their daughter and sister had become the subject of such wild speculation. Maria found herself defending Sarah's character to reporters and online trolls, insisting that her sister was not the kind of person who would abandon her family without explanation. "Sarah is the most honest, responsible person I know," Maria told a local television reporter. "She would never just disappear without telling us she was safe. If she's gone, it's because something happened to her, or because she felt she had no other choice." As the 3-month mark approached, Detective Hayes had to admit that the trail was growing cold. Without new evidence or witnesses, there was little more that police could do. Sarah's case would remain open, but it would no longer be actively investigated unless new information emerged. The family refused to give up. They continued to work with Carol Thompson, the private investigator, following up on every possible lead. They maintained the social media campaign and kept Sarah's photo in the public eye. They offered a substantial reward for any information leading to Sarah's whereabouts. But, privately, they began to prepare themselves for the possibility that they might never see Sarah again. Elena Martinez, Sarah's mother, lit candles at church every day and prayed for her daughter's safe return. David took leave from his job to help coordinate the search efforts. Maria struggled with guilt, wondering if there had been signs she missed that could have prevented whatever happened to her sister. The hospital where Sarah worked held a memorial service on the 3-month anniversary of her disappearance. Hundreds of people attended: co-workers, patients' families, nursing school classmates, and community members who had been touched by Sarah's story. Dr. Carter spoke about Sarah's dedication to her patients and her bright future in nursing. "Sarah Martinez represents the best of our profession," she said. "Her compassion, her attention to detail, and her advocacy for vulnerable patients made her an exceptional nurse. We hope and pray that wherever she is, she knows how much she means to all of us." But even as the community mourned and hoped, Sarah Martinez was very much alive. She was living under a different name in a small coastal town 300 miles away, working as a waitress in a seafood restaurant, and trying to build a new life while carrying the weight of a secret that had forced her to leave everything behind. The truth of why Sarah disappeared and what she was hiding would not emerge for several more months. When it finally did, it would shock everyone who thought they knew her and reveal a story of courage, sacrifice, and the lengths one person will go to protect the innocent.